Good afternoon. This is another episode of Portside Conversations with your host Laura Lee from Where to Next Agency, and I am coming to you live from on board the Avalon Envision, and this is our cruise director,
Hello.
Tony Campanilla.
Campailla. It's okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Welcome.
I just want to speak to you and learn a little bit more about sailing on Avalon. But before we dive into that, tell me a little bit more about who Tony is, how long you've been sailing, where you're from. Let me know a little bit more about you before we learn about your beautiful ship.
I've been sailing the rivers about 25 years now. This will be the 26th year. And I'm from Italy. I was born and raised in Belgium. My mom is from Flanders and my dad is from Sicily. And so I grew up in Belgium. Eventually I moved to Germany, moved to Switzerland for a few years. Lived in the States for about 8.5 years in Los Angeles. Moved back to Europe, lived in Austria for 2 years, and the last 15 years we've been living in Italy. 2 beautiful kids, 2 daughters, one is 7, one is 16, and wife is from Hungary, so quite international.
Wow, so you speak a lot of languages in your house, I bet.
We do. It's a necessity over here in Europe, small countries, right?
Definitely. So since you have been on the rivers for 25 plus years, are there any rivers left that you have not sailed on just yet?
Believe it or not, I've never done the Seine.
Really?
Yeah, and we don't choose our schedule, so the company will assign us. We can give our preferences and so, but for some reason I haven't had it. But I think that will change next year because we'll have a second ship that we're moving to the Seine, so they'll need more of us on the Seine River as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay.
And have I other rivers that I haven't done? The majority of the rivers I've done. I've done the Mekong in Southeast Asia. I've done the Nile. I've done pretty much all the waterways except for the Seine here in Europe. Oh, and there's another one I haven't done, and I can't do it. It's the Douro. The Douro in Portugal I have not done either, because apparently the cruise director's cabin is a very short bed and I don't fit.
Oh,
so
no.
That's about the only reason. But there was talk about building a second ship, and they said they're going to take it in consideration to build longer beds in there. For the guest cabins, everything is fine, so don't worry about that. But it's just for us, for some reason, the bed is a bit short.
That's interesting. I would never have thought of that as being a restriction for
Yeah,
a job placement.
I think it was an oversight, so it's okay.
So of all the rivers that you have sailed on, do you have a favorite?
Danube.
Danube?
Absolutely the Danube.
And why is that?
Well, we're just finishing the Rhine River right now, which is a phenomenal cruise. I can't say a bad word about it. And there is that unique stretch that we got to see a few days ago where you have all these castles. It's one of the densest concentration of castles in the whole world. But other than that, the Rhine is, as you've probably noticed, pretty industrialized, and the scenery is not the most spectacular one. The destinations that we do on the Rhine are spectacular, but the scenery of the river itself is not, with the exception of those castles, of course, is not the most enticing one, I would say. Danube has a lot more scenery to offer, a lot more green. The destinations that we do on the Danube, of course, are also phenomenal, just like on the Rhine, but there's a lot more green between the different destinations, because the Danube simply has not been industrialized as much as the Rhine, and I think that's why I kind of prefer the Danube.
Wonderful. Now, every evening you do your port talks, and the other night you gave a very good explanation that kind of recapped the different types of architecture and how to recognize the differences. Would you mind repeating that for me?
So I'm not a college professor, so I always try to keep it simple so that I understand it to begin with. And but in a nutshell, the easiest way to recognize the differences between the main architectural styles, there's many in between, but the main ones would be Roman architecture. And a typical feature of Roman architecture is the rounded arches that you can see in the porticos, that you can see in the window frames. They're perfectly rounded arches. This is a Roman invention. When you hear speaking about Romanesque architecture, it's basically the same thing, but it's not built by the Romans. That's why we call it Romanesque. So it was after the Roman Empire collapsed, the Western Roman Empire that is. So we're talking about the 600s and 700s and above. That's all Romanesque architecture, still the rounded arches. At the end of the 12th century, early 1200s, a new architecture came about. It was imported by the Crusaders from the Middle East, and it's the Gothic architecture. which are the pointed arches. So when you see an arch in a window frame or a door frame that comes together in a point, that's what we call Gothic architecture. That lasted for a couple hundred years. Still, all of a sudden, we end up with a new rebirth architecture called the Renaissance. And typical for Renaissance architecture are the square and rectangular window frames that you'll see in many palaces across Europe. Then we go into another style that is called Baroque. And Baroque basically is, let me just switch this off. Baroque basically is an architecture that has no real structural purpose. The only purpose it has is to please the eye. So if you see a church with a lot of decorations inside, that's Baroque for sure. And then Baroque gone mad is called Rococo. Just the word itself kind of drives you crazy. So those are some of the main architectural styles that you'll be able to find in Europe. And then later in the 19th century, you'll hear speaking about Neo-Romanesque, Neo-Gothic. So they kind of reintroduced these styles that were kind of gone out of fashion. They tried to reintroduce them in the 19th century.
Awesome. That was very, very helpful because we saw so many different styles of architecture, both in the castles and the palaces and the churches and the cathedrals. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of everything. So that was very helpful. Last question for you. What is the biggest myth about river cruises that you would love to set straight for the record?
That it's only for old people. That is still a very tenacious big myth. I guess it probably was true 30, 40 years ago. We've noticed that the average age of the cruiser has significantly gone down. But gone down or not, I mean, you'll find on our cruises people that are in their 80s, even in their 90s, but you find a lot of people that are in their 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. So there's definitely a change happening over the last 20 some years. It used to be that you either had the time, but you didn't have the money, or you had the money, but you didn't have the time. We're now getting into a generation that seems to have both, which of course causes then the demographics to become younger and younger. And I think the biggest asset of a river cruise is that no matter what your age is, you'll get something out of it, because we emphasize again and again and again that this is your cruise. Just because we offer a ton of excursions doesn't mean you have to participate in them. You can just catch a ride in town and do your own thing there. So that independent, the possibility of being independent while being on a group cruise is, I think, one of the biggest assets that we have to offer, so that every age category will get something out of it and will be happy at the end of the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking a couple of moments. I know you got a super busy schedule being the cruise director here. You and your staff have done an amazing job. I've certainly enjoyed my time on the Avalon Envision, and I wish you much success, and I hope you manage to get to Portugal and get a king size bed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Hope to see you on the rivers.